In today's tutorial, we are going to be making one of these adorable little drawstring bags. Now, these are my bread and butter. I have had a business called By the Bay Bag Co. for 8.5 years making these very bags. I've made over 20,000 of these bags all by myself over the last 8 years, selling them at knitting and crochet conventions and markets and online and wholesale. So if there's one thing that I know how to make, it is the drawstring bag. This pattern has 4 different sizes. So this is going to be the size medium, and this is the one that we're making in today's tutorial. They can be made out of a plethora of different fabrics. Almost any fabric will work. Stretchy fabric would even work too if you like sewing with stretchy fabric. I'm not a huge fan of knit stretchy fabric, so I haven't done that, but you could do that out of almost any fabric. So my bread and butter is the heavy canvas. So I've used heavy duck canvas on all 20,000 of those bags that I've made to sell. And I love heavy canvas. They don't have to be lined, but you can line it if you want to. They have all French seams on the inside, so you are not going to have any raw edges on the inside. They also include 2 pockets on the inside. So all of the seams are finished on the inside. There's no raw edges in here anywhere. I'm going to show you my technique of making boxed corners. So they all have a flat bottom. I even provide templates to do that with. And got drawstrings made out of macrame cord. I use the natural cotton webbing for my handles, but you can use any kind of webbing for your handles. You could even make your own handles to go on here. And they have so many uses. We use these all over our house for everything. My husband even uses it for his GoPro equipment for his business. So he has one of these canvas bags in a dark hunter green, throws all of his GoPro equipment in here and tosses it in his truck. The heavy canvas ones wash really, really well. Quilt cotton would wash well too. I just don't ever put cotton fabric in the dryer. So I wash mine, hang them dry, and they're good to go. I've used them for makeup bags. I've used them for toiletry bags. You could use them for almost anything. If you are ready to make one of these adorable drawstring bags, gather all of your supplies and your pattern, and let's get sewing. Okay, the supplies that you're going to need for today's project is going to be some sort of fabric. These can be made out of almost any kind of fabric. My bread and butter was heavy duck canvas. So these that I made were not lined, but I've used waxed canvas. I have these rolls of waxed canvas back here. I've used quilting cotton. I've used cotton canvas. This is cotton duck canvas. I've made them out of just about anything. Corduroy, denim, made them out of just about anything. But I'm going to show you how to do it out of regular cotton canvas, since that's very readily available. And I'm going to show you how to line it, because quilting cotton can be quite thin. So I'm going to show you how to do it with a lining. Even though we are doing all finished seams, they have all French seams in them. So you can do it with anything without lining it. But I'm going to show you how to do it with a lining today. Some other things that you might need after you cut out your fabric per the measurements in the pattern, you're going to need a ruler and some sort of marking tool, clips or pins, scissors, thread, your sewing machine, all the same basic stuff that you would need for just about any project. So whenever you're ready, cut out all of your pieces per the measurements in the pattern. This is all done by measurements. So there are no like pattern pieces that you have to tape together and put on here. And then with this quilt cotton, I'm going to use a different color for the lining. So you're going to basically treat these 2 pieces as one piece of fabric. So in order to do that, I'm just going to baste around the edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around the edge, just to keep these 2 pieces together so they don't shift around or anything. You could serge them if you wanted to. You could just pin them if you wanted to, but I think basting them together will make it the easiest to keep it all together. So I'm going to go do that real quick, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, I went and basted around all the edges to keep the lining piece and the quilt cotton piece all together. So we're going to treat this as one piece from now on. The other thing I forgot to tell you that you need is a handle. So this is 1 inch wide natural cotton webbing, which is what I've used on all of my bags that I've made for my business. But you can use any kind of handle material that you want. The 1 inch wide is great because it creates the wrist strap. So, but if you want to make a fabric one or cover the webbing with your fabric to make it match your bag, use the nylon webbing. Sky's the limit. Use whatever you like, but that's what I'm using. And then for the drawstrings, I've used 4mm macrame cord. I have tested out dozens of different kinds of drawstrings with these bags over the years. And I have found that this 4mm is great because it's strong enough that you can really tug on it to get your bag to close up really well. But it's not so thick that it creates bulk in the bag. So it makes a really great drawstring. So I've got 4mm macrame cord here for my drawstring. So the first step that we're going to do is we're going to take our pocket piece and we are going to hem it. I have pre-ironed mine, folded down 1/4 of an inch and then another 1/4 of an inch at the top for the hem. So I'm going to go top stitch that. And then I've also ironed up the bottom edge per the measurements in the pattern, so that we'll have a finished edge on the bottom of our pocket also. So your pocket's going to go like this. So let's go over to the sewing machine and we're going to hem the top edge of our pocket. Okay, now once you've got that top stitch, then we're going to take this and we're going to sew from the bottom seam up to the top of the pocket, and we're going to back stitch really well at the beginning and especially the end right here, because this is where you're going to have some stress points when you stuff stuff down in your pocket. So you want to make sure that you back tack really well right there. So using that crease that you ironed into your pocket as a guide, make sure you back stitch really well. And now you have 2 pockets. Those are going to be on the inside of your bag. Trim all your... The next step is going to be to pin your pocket piece to your bag. So I have my bag body piece with the wrong side facing up and my pocket piece with the right side facing up. And I have measured down the 2 inches that it says in the pattern from the top raw edge, and I've just smoothed it across. It should go from side to side all the way across, and you're just going to pin this in place. And then you can use clips too if you want to. I'm just going to clip up the top edge up here so that it doesn't go anywhere when I move it. And then you're going to take this over to your sewing machine and we're just going to top stitch right along this bottom edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from this fold. Okay, now once you've got that top stitch, then we're going to take this and we're going to sew from the bottom seam up to the top of the pocket, and we're going to back stitch really well at the beginning and especially the end right here, because this is where you're going to have some stress points when you stuff stuff down in your pocket. So you want to make sure that you back tack really well right there. So using that crease that you ironed into your pocket as a guide, make sure you back stitch really well. And now you have 2 pockets. Those are going to be on the inside of your bag. All right, now that we have our pocket on, we're going to take it and we're going to fold it with the wrong sides together. This is going to seem backwards. Just trust the process, but you're going to match up the top edge and you're going to clip the side seams. Make sure that you catch your pockets inside that side seam. And then you can add some clips down the side to hold it all in place. And we're going to sew both of the side seams at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And this is going to seem like you're doing it backwards, but just trust the process. We're making French seams here. So now that you got the sides clipped, you're going to sew down the side seam at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, so both of our side seams sewn. Now you're going to take these little corners down here and you're going to clip off just a little bit so that you have room to turn the seam all the way out. So I mean just a little tiny bit of the corner. So it should look something like that. Let's clip this other one off. And now we're going to take it over to our ironing board and we're going to turn it right sides out and we're going to press these side seams flat so that we can top stitch it. I'm going to go ahead and trim all of these little fuzzies off too. Now that you've turned it wrong side out and you've ironed it nice and flat and rolled out all of your seams so that they're nice and tight. I also pressed a crease across the bottom edge. We're going to use that later. Now you're going to take this and you're going to sew this down at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And what that's going to do is that's going to enclose this raw edge on the outside. So that's called a French seam. So then you have no raw edges in your project. So 3/8 of an inch seam allowance down both side seams. And I'm using my little quilting guide here just so my side seam is nice and straight. Be sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end. And once you're done with that, you have a nice little French seam here. Let me trim this thread. So you have a nice little French seam. Now we're going to take our bag and we're going to turn it right side out. So we're turning the right side back to the outside, and you can kind of poke your finger in these little corners right here and get them poked out really nice. Another thing you can use is something like this. It's actually called a bone marker, but I use it to poke out my corners, or a bone folder, something like that. Okay, so once you have your bag turned right side out, remember that crease that we made at the beginning, when we ironed our bag nice and flat. You're going to take that crease and you're going to open up your corners diagonally. So I've got my finger in the corner, so these are my corners, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to open it up diagonally. And what we're going to do is we are going to match that bottom crease with the side seam on the side. So once you kind of have those lined up, it's going to look something like that. And in this pattern, there are templates for triangles, and it's going to give you some measurements. You can use the templates to mark your boxed corners, or there is a way to do it where you cut out the little square in the bottom, but this is how I've always done it. I've always done it with the triangles. So grab those templates for the size that you're making. All right, once you have your template, my husband made me these out of acrylic a long time ago. So I have all of my little triangles made out of acrylic templates. So you're going to take your bag where you've matched up the bottom seam with this side seam, and you've got this little triangle. And you're going to lay it flat, and you're going to use your little triangle template and make sure that you get the center mark where the seam is. And you're going to just match up the little corner here, and you're going to make a line going across. Now this is a heat erasable pen. I love these. This is some I got off of Amazon, I think. But a friction pen is the exact same thing. And so this mark will go away when we iron the pen, iron our project. Now, I don't ever clip these, but you can pin or clip this to make sure that this stays where it's at. Like I said, I've got this down to a science, so I don't ever pin anything really. But if you're making one of these for the first time, you might want to pin it. Now, I also make sure that my seam allowance on the inside when I'm folding these corners down is going towards away from the pocket side of the bag, which is what I consider the front of the bag. So I'm going to do the other corner, make sure that this bottom crease is lined up with our side seam, pull it nice and flat. And then I'm going to use my template and make sure that this seam lines up with the center line on our template. And then I'm just going to draw a stitching line across there. And then I'll use a clip to hold this corner out. And now we're going to go and we're going to sew directly on that line all the way across, back stitching at the beginning and the end. And then we're going to trim off this triangle at about 1/8 of an inch from that stitching line. You're just going to go straight down that line. Okay, and then once you have your triangle stitch, you're going to trim the triangle part off about 1/8 of an inch away from your seam and trim all your little threads. So you'll end up with something that looks like that. So we're going to trim off both sides, and then you're going to turn it back. I don't know if you can hear Goose through the microphone. He's very bored now and he's asleep and he's snoring. Okay, now that we got those triangles trimmed off, we're going to take our bag, which is right side out at this point, and we're going to turn it back inside out. And what that's going to do is we're going to make another French seam, so we're going to enclose this raw edge. So you turn these out, and I always stick my fingers in the corners like that to poke out these corners. So if you were making this out of canvas or something that you didn't line, all of your raw edges would be enclosed with all of these French seams. So I just kind of roll this seam out, and I honestly don't even take this to the iron to press it. You can press this seam if you want to. When I'm making them really fast, like for a market or something, I don't even bother taking it to the iron. I just roll these seams out and hold it. Now we're going to stitch this again at 3/8 of an inch away from this edge to enclose those raw edges. And then I'm going to do the other side. And you want to make sure that your seam allowance from your side seam is laying flat. Whichever direction it went, make sure it's laying flat. So then you have an enclosed French seam on your bottom corners. So when you turn your bag back right side out and poke out the corners, it's nice and finished on the outside. And what that does is that creates a square flat bottom on your bag. Get it all turned. You've got a square flat bottom on your bag, so your bag will stand up. The heavy canvas ones stand up by themselves. So now you've got your bag with your pockets on the inside and a nice flat bottom. So now we need to add the top for the drawstring. All right, now we're going to take our two top pieces, and I have taken them and folded them in half short ways, and I've just run my nail over it to make a crease in the center of the piece. You can use this, you can do that with an iron if you want to. And then I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to measure, let's see, for this size bag, we need to measure out 6 inches from this middle crease. So I'm going to mark 6 inches away, and then I'm going to make a line going across here. And then I'm also going to measure 1 inch in from each side and make a little mark so that we know where to stop stitching. And you really only have to do this on one of these because you're going to be sewing them together. So we are going 6 inches away from the center for this size bag. And then we're making a mark all the way across. And then we're measuring in 1 inch from each edge and marking a little line so we know where to stop stitching. Now, I tried many different ways to do drawstrings on the top of these bags, and this is the way that I found that was like the fastest with finished edges and had the most reinforcement on the drawstring area. I have never had one of these bags fail in the drawstring area. I have had people overload them and pull their handle off. But that's the only problem I've ever had with any of these bags. Out of 20,000 bags, 20,000 plus bags made out of the heavy canvas, I literally have only had 3 come back in 8 years and had the handles repaired. So this is my tried and true method on this. So we're going to put these 2 pieces right sides together. And you can pin them or clip them. It's just such a short area. I'm not going to. But you're going to sew on this line up until that little mark that we made 1 inch from the edge. And you're going to back stitch a couple of times on that 1 inch mark. And then you're going to skip over this center part right here. So you're not going to sew that center part. And you're going to do the same thing on this edge. And you're going to do both ends. So both short ends. So I'm going to make sure that they're all lined up. Move my quilting bar out of the way. And on this line, I'm just going to go up to that mark, and then I'm going to back stitch several times. So then I'm going to go backwards and forwards. And then I'm going to skip over the center and back on the second mark, and I'm going to do the same thing. And what that's going to do whenever we do both sides and we flip this, that's leaving a hole in that seam for our drawstring to go through. So do both short ends of your top pieces. Once you have this sewn, you're going to take this over to your ironing board and you're going to press these seam allowances open and flat. And then you're also going to press one end down 1/4 inch all the way around. We're almost done. So now you're going to take your bag and you're going to put the handle on it and you're going to pin it 2.5 inches away from the side seam. It doesn't really matter which side seam you put it on, but I always put it with my my pockets. When I hold the bag open like this with my pockets on the right side, it's just where I've always put them. But you're going to measure 2.5 inches away from this side seam and you're going to pin or clip your handles on here. So I'm just going to eyeball it because I've done this so many times. And you want to make sure that your handle is not twisted. So make sure that there's no twist in your loop. So it should look something like that. Now you can baste that on if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and baste mine on real quick so they don't move around. All right, once you have those basted on, you're going to take your loop and you're going to put the raw edge to the raw edge at the top of the bag and you're going to match up the side seams. So it should be going something like this. And then you're going to want to clip it or pin it all the way around. Okay, so you have your bag clipped all the way around with your top with the right sides together. You're going to sew that all the way around at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I like to start at one of the side seams. All right, now you have the top sewn onto the bag. Make sure that you are sewing these side seams on the top open so that you have a hole for your drawstring to come through. So now what you're going to do is you're going to pull this up, and you can press this if you want to. I never do. And you're going to fold this towards the inside of the bag, and you're going to make sure that this folded edge that we ironed earlier is just below the stitching line right here, because what we're going to do is we're going to pin that all the way around, and then we're going to stitch in the ditch right here on the outside of the bag. So you want this just covering this stitching line to make sure that when we stitch in the ditch, it's going to catch this back. So you can turn your bag wrong side out to fold it down and pin it if you want to make sure that you're catching all of that. We're going to be sewing from the inside, from the outside, the front side, the right side, whatever you want to call it, the pretty side, whatever you want to call it. So go ahead and pin that down all the way around. Now that we have that pinned all the way around on the inside, I've turned my bag right side back out. Again, do that very carefully because there's lots of pins. And now we're going to stitch in the ditch right along this seam that we made earlier. So I always like to start at one of the side seams again, and you're going to just follow that line and make sure your needle's going right on that seam line right there. And you want to kind of feel as you go to make sure that that edge is a little bit further down from that so that you're catching that edge. Alternatively, if you don't mind the seam showing, you can top stitch 1/8 of an inch in from that seam on the top side also. Now when you get back to where you started, you're just going to back stitch over the ends and trim your threads. And yes, I sewed over the pins. I am a rebel. I sew over pins. Don't come for me. I've been doing this for over 40 years. I have always sewn over pins and very rarely, I won't say never, but very, very rarely have I ever hit a pin. So remove all your pins. Now, if you're using matching thread, see, now I did not catch it right there. See how that didn't catch? That's why you have to make sure that that edge is down below that seam allowance. So check and make sure that you caught it all in your seam. And if not, it's okay. Just go back and stitch over your stitching again, feeling that edge to make sure that it's getting caught. There we go. We got it. So just go through, trim all your threads, remove all your pins, and we'll see how this turned out. Okay, I'm going to trim. Did I get all the pins? Okay, I'll go back and trim the threads in a minute. So that's how it should look on the outside. Now, I ended up going just a hair on to the top. I don't know if you can see that. That's where I stitched over it. Let's go to a pretty side. So I stitched just a hair on the top right there, trying to make sure that I caught the edge. That's how our bag is looking so far. So now we're going to take a safety pin and we're going to run our drawstring through. So you're going to go in the side with the handle all the way around and out the side with the handle and tie that drawstring in a knot. And then you're going to do the same going the opposite directions. All right, we're done with our bag. So you can just pull those two drawstrings, close it up. You've got a fantastic little drawstring pouch. Now, I use these everywhere in my house, literally. I mean, I have these little canvas bags literally for everything in my house. My husband uses it for his GoPro equipment for his job. I use them as a makeup bag. I take one traveling with me almost everywhere as my makeup bag, my toiletry bags. I've got knitting projects in it. I've got crochet projects in it. I have some sewing projects and embroidery projects. They'd make a great bag for little kids' toys to take to restaurants or traveling. The sky is really the limit with these. You can make them out of almost any fabric. They have so many uses and they are so easy to make. You could also use them for reusable gift bags in the holidays. So this pattern comes with 4 different sizes. So this is the size medium. So there's one smaller, 2 that are larger than this. So you could really make them for just about anything. Love the pockets on the inside. I designed those to wear a piece of paper. So like if you printed out the pattern, they were really designed to begin with as knitting project bags. So I would print out my patterns that I would knit and I would fold them in half and then they fit perfectly in this pocket. And then like my knitting needles and on my scissors and all that so would fit in the other one. So Great pockets for just about anything to organize. Got a great little wrist strap so you can carry it on your wrist. It's a great little handle. You can throw it in your luggage to take it with you, throw it in your purse. Might even make a good lunch bag if you don't have anything that needs to stay cold. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Be sure to like and subscribe and all the things. Follow me on all the social media. I'm at By the Bay Bag Coat on everything. I'm on a mission to get my TikTok account, hopefully before they up to 10,000 subscribers. Right now we are kind of almost to the middle of that. So if you want to go over to TikTok and give me a follow there, I show really quick tutorials on there, and I do a lot of like time lapse of my projects on there also, but I have a lot of little tutorials on there too. So if you'll give me a like and a subscribe, if you make one of these, be sure to tag me. I'd love to see what fabrics you use when you make these. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will talk to you in the next tutorial. Bye.